Hello everyone, welcome to Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. North Korea's provocations have continued even until recently, conducting a power test of a cruise missile with a super large warhead just last weekend. Such ongoing threatening moves are making experts wonder whether the regime is no longer interested in negotiating with the U.S. and even risking all-out war. Meanwhile, more than ever, North Korea is showing much strengthened ties with Russia, with a delegation reportedly slated to visit Moscow's parliament soon. How do experts see boosted ties between these two rogue states? And how should South Korea manage its relationship with Russia? For this, we invite Professor Lim Eun-jung from Kongju National University. Welcome to the show, Professor Lim.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. And we also have Bruce Klinger, Senior Research Fellow from the Heritage Foundation. Good to have you with us again, Mr. Klinger.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, first question to our Professor Lim. So North Korea on Saturday conducted a cruise missile super large warhead power test and also test fired a new type of anti-aircraft missile. Now, two tests together, does that mean anything?
Well, obviously, especially since the so-called Hanoi No Deal, again, North Korea, its provocation, the level of its provocation has been increasing, consistently increasing. Of course, this is only February, but the new year started, very much worrisome situations made by the North is they keep conducting the cruise missile test, which has been unprecedented. This year only they have launched 4 different cruise missile tests. It's, of course, it looks like they are trying to showcase the show of their military capability, not only to just Seoul, to the rest of the world. So what does that mean? Of course, among the experts, even in this country, there are 2 probably mainly different voices about these kind of, again, the behavior. So one group will say this is more like a very much offensive behavior, so we really need to worry about any possibility of war, real war, started by the North. Or the other group will be emphasizing rather just real, they are trying to cause a war rather than that. The other group of experts will say this will be more like a real defense purpose from their own point of view. Because especially, since the Washington Declaration last year, so-called NCG, again, the Nuclear Consultative Group, started, obviously, the extended deterrence has been improved further, and not only just bilateral cooperation between Seoul and Washington, now trilateral, again, with the Tokyo. We have been strengthening the defense capabilities. So from Pyongyang's point of view, they will probably argue that, this is more like a defense purpose. So whether or not you take, either side of the interpretations, the situation is pretty much different from the past, which keeps, the worries and concerns, not only among the experts and among public too, which is pretty much sad.
I see. Divided views regarding North Korea's moves, all right? Now, Mr. Klinger, Kim Jong-un also visited the Nampo Navy shipyard, where he urged a full-fledged effort for shipbuilding and naval enforcement. Now, the main focus of boosting naval power would be developing nuclear-powered submarines. Is that correct?
Yeah, so North Korea has long focused on its land-based ballistic missiles of all ranges, including that which can hit South Korea, Japan, and the United States. But alongside that, they've had sort of less focus on a sea-based nuclear force. But the submarine-launched ballistic missiles haven't really progressed too much, but clearly also a threat. But in recent years, North Korea has expanded this naval threat with sea-launched cruise missiles, and we've seen a lot of tests of that just last month. And North Korea also is, as we're seeing on the screen there, the warships, which could have sea-launched cruise missiles, also an underwater drone system that they say is nuclear capable. Kim has also said that he wants to develop a nuclear-powered submarine. That's quite ambitious. I think experts really question whether they will have that ability or have that ability in the near future. Recently, they showed a submarine which they had basically cut in half and then inserted an extension in the middle of it to launch 10 different missiles, ballistic and cruise. But even if a focus is on nuclear-powered submarines, I think that will take quite some time to be a viable threat.
All right, I see your point, Mr. Klinger. Now, staying on North Korea's threats, Professor Lim, President Yoon underlined the possibility of Pyongyang staging more provocations before the general election, which is scheduled for this year, April. Now, what shape might these provocations take?
Well, this year is really unusual, as we all know. In January, we witnessed the presidential election in Taiwan. And in April, as you just mentioned, we will have a general election for the National Assembly. But probably the climax will be, of course, the November American presidential election. We will see this series of national level elections in very important countries to Korea as well. So having had this situation, again, all these democratic societies are dealing with their own domestic political issues. Again, from North Korea's point of view, which is obviously not a liberal democracy at all. So their power has been more like a consistent, and that their probably strategic behavior can be much more well designed by their own leadership. But anyhow, having had all this kind of probably chances from their behavior, they are trying to make some noises or some variables. For example, of course, my President Yoon already mentioned the possibility, but not only just conventional provocations, non-conventional provocations such as cyber attacks, for example. Cyber attacks by North, the types has become much more diverse than before, and as it has become much more really offensive to many, national or public agencies. Even experts like me, we really need to be careful when we are opening, some mail from like some agency. It looks like a national agency, but sometimes it can be a fake. So these kind of cyber attacks are very much really threatening, or drone provocation can be thinkable too, or many different types of, again, all these hackers or like a cyber attacks are done by their state affiliated hacker, which is the tricky part, because these are the people who we cannot punish by our own, sovereignty. So again, the tricky part. Again, this society is very much politically divided these days. So I think we all need to be much more careful about any that kind of, bad scenario.
I see. Well, one thing for sure is that North Korea is going to continue with a variety of, provocations throughout this year. All right. Now, Mr. Klinger, due to North Korea's continuous provocations, there are ongoing discussions on whether North Korea is actually preparing for war, as Pyongyang script the bedrock goal of reuniting with Seoul. What is your view on this?
All militaries prepare for war, and North Korea certainly has been developing and testing and exercising formidable military capabilities. Obviously, most nervous, or those that cause us the most nervousness, are their nuclear and missile systems. However, the near focus on whether North Korea is actually preparing to go to war has been not only because of North Korea's statements and actions, but an article by two distinguished experts that said North Korea has made the strategic decision to go to war. And as they point out, that's the equivalent of the intelligence community issuing a warning of war, which by definition is a state intends war or is on a course that substantially increases the risk of war and is taking steps to prepare for war. Now, when I was in the CIA in 1994, we debated whether to issue a formal warning of war back then, and we decided against it. So the article has generated a lot of interest, but very little agreement from other Korean experts. We feel that there's no indications yet that North Korea has made that strategic decision. But that said, we are also very concerned about the likelihood of increased provocations or even another tactical level deadly attack, as North Korea did twice in 2010 against the Cheonan and Yongpyeong-do. And there's also the concern of stumbling into a conflict, that both Koreas have been very forward-leaning in their talk of preemptive attacks on the other if they perceive or potentially misperceive preparations by the other for an attack. So we think that North Korea has not made the strategic decision to go to war, but there's a greater likelihood of tactical clashes, which could then inevitably lead or possibly lead to a greater conflict. So I think we're in for a bumpy ride this year, but what I would say is put on your helmets, but don't necessarily get under the desk quite yet.
All right, I see. So concerning situation, but no indication of imminent war, I guess. All right, Mr. Klinger. Now, Professor Lim, moving on to North Korea-Russia ties, experts point out that recent military cooperation between Russia and North Korea is indeed concerning, as improvements of North Korea's this indigenous capabilities would increase the likelihood of conflicts involving nuclear weapons. Is that correct?
Well, Russia's invasion to Ukraine that really changed the kind of debates, academic debates or discourse regarding the modern war. Because again, obviously Russia is one of the P5 members of the United Nations Security Council, but it obviously violated the spirit of United Nations. And it threatened the other party with using, how would you say, the kind of chance of using nuclear weapon. Of course, they didn't make that decision. However, they kept, again, the threatening, again, the other party with mentioning, again, the chance. So using the nuclear weapons for the first, this became a kind of real agenda for many countries. So that is why more and more experts are talking about a chance which obviously should not happen. However, but more and more experts are talking about a chance of using nuclear weapons by North for the first. However, of course, as Mr. Klinger already explained very well, again, as long as they don't have really second or the third strike attack capability, again, the chance of causing a real war by North, of course, it cannot be that much high. However, again, the tactical level, local level, parochial level should be still considered more seriously than the past, which is, again, very unfortunate thing for every country in the world, I think.
All right, I see. Well, Mr. Klinger, in fact, Russia and North Korea ties are actually strengthening ever more than before. According to the U.S. allied intelligence officials, Russia has allowed the release of millions of dollars in frozen North Korean assets. And also, North Korean delegation is going to visit the lower house of Russia's parliament on February 13th. Now, how do you see such moves between Russia and North Korea?
Well, all of these are indicators that the bilateral relationship is strengthening, and we know that in one way, the North Korea is sending lots of artillery shells and rockets to Russia. Estimates are perhaps even up to 2 million shells now, as well as dozens of more modern short-range ballistic missiles. But we don't really know what North Korea is getting in return. There could be economic benefits, it could be food aid, or very worrisome military technology. The report now about the release of some funds, which Right now, the indications are it's perhaps 9 million out of a $30 million frozen account, which the number is still very small, but it's again, it's an indication of the growing strength of the bilateral relationship. It could be a precursor to additional sanctions evading money being released to North Korea. Also, Russia may allow more North Korean workers into Russia, their wages would be provided back to the regime. And on military technology, some experts think that it could be the crown jewels of military technology, nuclear warhead design, ballistic missile designs, or re-entry vehicle assistance to North Korea. I think many of us think that is likely too high a price for Russia to pay for older ammunition by North Korea, even though in great quantities. I think more likely it would be kind of a second-tier military technology for their conventional weapons, aircraft, submarines, military reconnaissance, satellite capability.
All right, I see your point. Well, until now, we have been talking about boosted ties between Pyongyang and Moscow, but Professor Lim, I'd like to also ask you about the relationship between Seoul and Moscow, which is quite worsening right now. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson actually criticized President Yoon for being blatantly biased after Yoon described Pyongyang as the only country to legalize the preemptive use of nuclear weapons. How do you see such remarks?
Well, again, I don't want to negate the importance of the bilateral relations with Russia. It's also our neighbor, and South Korea is still an importer of many of those products, important products from Russia. And at the end of the day, as long as we are all, live together in this region in order to, just maintain the peace in this region. Of course, cooperation with Russia is important. However, again, as I mentioned, Russia violated the UN spirit, again, crossed the line with the force, and they are now backing up the country who is threatening us all the time. So, well, again, we cannot and we don't want to overthrow all the whatever those past we have accomplished together. However, for now, I think the relations looks chilled, which is again very much unfortunate. But I think it takes little time. But I think both neither Moscow nor Seoul wants to just cut off the relation with each other, because still, even though the total trade between the two countries has shrunk this significantly compared to before the war, however, still, again, the trade relationship is there too. And if Russia is rational enough, if they calculate all this economic benefit or other those political reputations from the international society and so on, I don't think Moscow will cut off the relationship with us. So we'll see. We want to be cautious too.
Right, I see your point. Well, Mr. Klinger, despite the spat, as our Professor Lim already pointed out, the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister in charge of the Asia-Pacific region still visited Seoul and held talks with South Korean officials. Now, what discussions took place during his visit, and is this just part of efforts to manage ties at the minimum level?
When bilateral relations are strained, they can and should continue. South Korea called into the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Russian ambassador, to push back on the statements by Moscow against President Yoon. And that, I think, is consistent with President Yoon's efforts to have relations of mutual respect, as he's talked earlier about the relations with China, where even if there are differences of view, even if there's some strains, they want it to be based on mutual respect. So they want Russia to act responsibly. They want Russia to treat South Korea responsibly. And I think President Yoon was quite correct in calling out Russia for its brutal violations through the invasion of Ukraine, as well as the growing relationship with North Korea, and the concern by Seoul that military technology might flow to North Korea, which would, of course, increase the threat by North Korea to South Korea, as well as Japan and the United States. So I think South Korea has to do that. They have to call out violations, whether it's by Russia or North Korea or China, when they occur.
All right, I see your point, Mr. Klinger. Now, before we wrap up this show, Professor Lim, I'd like to ask you this last question. With so many variables ahead of us, it seems quite necessary or important, should I say, to manage ties with Russia and China, because we do not know what's going to happen. But in what direction should Seoul's diplomatic policy go ahead?
Again, this year is very tricky. Even Japan, politically, they do have many problems now. The ruling party, LDP, Liberal Democratic Party, they do have their own internal problem, and we have general election. So it's very much a difficult time to concentrate our, diplomatic efforts. And China, it does have its own internal problem too, economically.
Right.
So it's difficult. However, still, I do think this is the time for everybody to revive the trilateral cooperation framework. Here, trilateral means, again, Korea, Japan, China. Again, U.S. is always, and our robust alliance will remain as robust as always. However, again, the China is another key player when we are trying to deal with North Korea. So I think this year, I hope I can see the revival of trilateral cooperation framework among the three countries.
Right. I see your point. Well, thank you, Professor Lim.
Thank you.
Well, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Mr. Klinger and Professor Lim, for your time and insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.